The murder of Jastine Valdez sent shockwaves across Ireland and remains one of the most baffling cases in recent memory. A native of the Philippines, young Justine and her parents moved here to start a better life. But on that ill-fated day, the 19th of May 2018, Justine got off a bus in Enniskerry, County Wicklow, and was suddenly abducted. Her disappearance sparked one of the largest Garda manhunts ever, ultimately ending in tragedy when her killer Mark Hennessy was located in a business park in Cherrywood 2 days later. Gardaí shot and killed Hennessy after it was believed he may have been harming Justine and himself inside the car. A note was then discovered inside his vehicle that pointed officers toward a wooded area at Puck's Castle in Rathmichael, where Justine's body was ultimately found. To this day, Hennessy's motive for carrying out this horrendous crime has never been fully established. However, today, you'll hear for the first time the account of the senior Garda who led that investigation. Former Detective Superintendent Frank Keenaghan, a decorated officer of 40 years, today tells of his incredible efforts in leading the manhunt to find Justine and Hennessy. The now retired officer reveals for the first time the full extent of what it's like to investigate such a horrific crime, the impact it had on him, and his shocking thoughts on Hennessy's motive.
So, May 2018, a young Filipina student called Jastine Valdez, she'd been at a gym, hadn't she?
She'd been at the gym and she'd been in the local spar shop and she'd been in and around there, yeah.
In Enniskerry or Bray, was it?
Bray,
in
yeah,
Bray.
Yeah.
And then she got a bus. Her family lived out in Enniskerry, and she got a bus, and she was seen getting off the bus. I think around 5 p.m. on the Saturday, the 18th of May, I think it was.
On the 19th of May, Saturday 19th of May.
Saturday 19th of May. So Justine disappeared, and that provoked really one of the biggest investigations in modern Garda history. You were the senior investigating officer. You were in charge of this investigation. So how did it start for you?
I can't exactly remember how it started. Obviously a phone call. I think, Justine was very close to her mum, really close to her mum, and they kept in touch all the time. They were texting all the time. And I think her parents, you see, were working, and the expectation was that Justine would be home by 6, but they probably didn't get back into the house for a couple of hours after that. So it was late enough on the Saturday night when it was probably early Sunday morning when I got involved, because I know that the sergeant in charge in Bray that night done Trojan work with his team, but suddenly a missing person call came in, and I think, from memory, and I could be wrong here, but maybe not too far off the mark, that maybe it was 8 or 9 o'clock by the time the parents got back in they were working in the local house.
Yeah, yes.
And I think they probably didn't get back later, and maybe they were a bit shocked that Justine wasn't there, because that would be out of kilter for her not to be there. And I think then that they made a missing person, and then from that it escalated, and I suppose I wasn't really told very much about it until maybe very early on the Sunday morning.
Like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
All right.
So I came in and I suppose your normal thing then is to look at to what team you have around you. But I suppose when I did the SIO course in Scotland, in Ciaran in Scotland, as well as in the Garda College, and I remember when we came to the missing persons investigations, and that the Brits they talk about 6 hours, 12 hours, diminishing returns on all the rest of it. I've always been kind of conscious of that. So by the time I get in 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking how many hours have gone. So I'm thinking, God, the chances of recovering Justine, well, and all the rest of it we're really up against it here. We have a shorter time span now than. Because
it was effectively 12 hours that she'd been gone by the time you were on the scene.
So I was very conscious of that. So it was difficult to try and put together everything that was happening.
And when you walked in, what did the team have? Did they have, for example, and was there CCTV footage from the bus or for getting off the bus? Did you have that at that stage?
Yeah, and I'm very grateful to our friends and colleagues there at Double Bus, because we joke about it now, but they're not used to being called out of the bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, but their manager did get out of bed and did come in and retrieve that footage for us, and that's where we got the lead on the cash guy.
Yes, so talk to us about that.
I was just going to ask, obviously, did it dawn pretty early on that this was an unusual case, that she may have been abducted?
It was very difficult to believe that she was abducted, but yet and all, she didn't go to a nightclub. She hadn't gone anywhere that she shouldn't have been, and we had a kind of a putting together a profile on her very quickly, and you could see that she was just a lovely young girl, that could be any of our daughters. She's just a lovely young girl, and very close to her mum and dad, and this was highly out of kilter for her to be gone missing like this. So do you think of abduction? Do you think of whatever? It's so many options.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, even in the early stages of the investigation, did it seem this is unusual? This is not a normal missing persons case. No,
it's not, and you get that kind of sense, and that there's something not right. As I say, we were up against it here. There was. Time wasn't on our side, wasn't our friend anymore. We were up against it, yeah.
So, when you went in, when you went into was it the incident room? You went in about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Did you fear at that stage that she'd been murdered?
I felt at that stage that she would probably been held prisoner or hostage somewhere. I wasn't giving up. I was still hoping that she was alive.
And what you mentioned the Qashqai. That was the Qashqai driven by Mark Hennessy.
Yeah.
Talk to us. What does the video show?
Yeah, the video showed basically this Qashqai following the bus and passing it, and that's all we had really. We kind of knew the year, but we had a lot of Qashqais then to eliminate, and then having a look at and it was the most popular selling make of car, mark or model of car that year. So there was a lot of them around, and there was a lot of them to go through. But it was only a glimpse of it, and you didn't get a full reg on the CCTV.
Could you see any of the year of the reg?
See the year. Right. I think we got the year. I haven't researched it. I haven't looked at it now since, but I think we got the year of the car, because I think that's where we started focusing, that year of the car.
Does the video show Justine getting off the bus?
It does, I think, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'm nearly sure. But we had witness statements to say that where she went after she got off the bus. We had witness statements to show her walking towards home. Then we had witness statements of the Qashqai pulled up, and I think there were 2 young people in that car with their mum, and I think they saw something untoward. So we had an area then that we thought that the Qashqai had stopped to pick her up. So that obviously became a focus of attention, and there were massive searches carried out around that particular area.
If memory serves me right, I think that mother and their kids effectively saw Justine struggling in the back of the car trying to get out.
Yeah.
Is that fair? Is that your recollection?
Yeah.
So that's obviously a major red flag.
Yeah.
Okay. And look, we obviously know who Mark Hennessy is now, and we'll come to what happened to him afterwards, but how did you find the car? How did you identify the car and Mark Hennessy?
I suppose we could account for a lot of the other cars, and when we called to Mark Hennessy's house, the car wasn't there. So that was a kind of don't throw all my eggs in one basket, but this is looking like, and then when we actually talked to his wife, Mark had the car, he was out, and then maybe at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning you would expect him to be at home, but he wasn't.
When did his wife, when did she last recall seeing him?
He had gone out, she had come home that evening, and he had gone out.
Okay.
And hadn't come back.
So that was obviously around 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then
Maybe 4, 5, 6, 4. Well, what time was the?
was it just? I think it was half 5. Was it?
4, 4:30. So he was going out, and he went out. And
so by maybe 10 o'clock, do you think you have your man?
yeah, by 10 o'clock. I think we have him all right, and no sign of him, and we're not getting a lot of cooperation from places that we think we should be getting cooperation. So we're there trying to send messages out to him on that, and at this stage we are talking to his family, and I'm very conscious that of Mark's family, because his mum and dad and brother and that are absolutely salt of the earth, lovely people, really, decent, honest to God, hard-working people. And
so was it you, or were people in your team? Were they ringing? I presume you had Mark Hennessy's number. Were you ringing him? Were you texting him? What was happening there?
We were calling to where he worked last, and we were looking for all the haunts that he might hang out in. And we knew there was a family gathering later on that day on Sunday, and we were watching that, and we were circulating the number at that stage, and while we had other avenues of investigation also to deploy teams on, that was one of the leads that we were following up.
Yeah, so I remember the media effectively got involved on the Sunday morning. I think there may have been a missing person appeal put out by the Garda press office, and it very quickly became a massive story. I mean, it's a major investigation for you, but for us it blew up as a massive story. And you were at the eye of that storm. Were you insulated? Did you feel pressure? What's it like to be under so much scrutiny? Because you were.
I suppose the first thing in a major investigation is to gather a good team around you, and the second thing is to stick to the Garda system, which works. And after that, then you have to develop a relationship with the family and do your very, very best for them. And I suppose the media are, come third or fourth or fifth down the line, and they play a huge role in when you need information circulated. But sometimes there's a thing called unique knowledge, which you don't want circulated, and you have a close-knit team around you, and you're saying what goes on in this room stays in this room. So sometimes we're very reticent about talking to the media, and you have to think about what you want to say to the media, and then when you say what you have to say, you invariably are swamped with dozens of questions, and then you're so circumspect, you're saying, I can't really answer that, I can't really answer this, I'm asking them for help, but I'm not prepared to do this, I'm not prepared to answer them that. So you build up this kind of roadblock with the media. So you have to. And I thought it was
smart.
That.
I thought it was smart. Effectively, the superintendent did the talking, and your team was beavering away in the background.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
That's how it works, and that's how it should work, and that's ideal, because the superintendent comes into the interview room. You brief the superintendent about where you're going and what's happening and all this, and the chief superintendent, the divisional officer as well, because he has to keep the assistant commissioner and the commissioner up to speed as well on all of these investigations. And these investigations are so fluid, like every hour is a new update. So those lines of communication have to be maintained at all times. But the superintendent comes in, and whether it's the superintendent from the press office or whether it's the district officer, and ideally it should be the district officer, because the district officer is so immersed and involved in that, and he's playing a dual role, or he or she, with members of the public, the family, and all the rest, reassuring everybody that this is all being taken care of, because the SIO doesn't really have the time to come out and start taking on this role as well. So this is an ideal role for the district officer or divisional officer.
But is it fair to say, Frank, was this a race against time in your mind?
Oh, it was, absolutely. And as I said, the sort of the diminishing returns in that 6 hours, 12 hours, it's like the lessons learned from Madeline McCann, and it's a thing that I studied in Tullyan with the SIO course there. This sort of diminishing returns of success.
obviously this is a race against time, Frank, and we've spoken about that. When, in your heart of hearts, as a detective inspector and as a human, did you think Justine was dead?
I think sometime on Sunday afternoon, when there was no sign of Mark Hennessy, I kind of was hoping, because I'm an optimist, that I wasn't right, but at the same time I kind of knew that time wasn't a friend, that the more the hours passed by, that it was more than likely that it wasn't going to.
But it was a race against time for you.
It was a race against
personally,
time.
You knew you were up against the clock.
I knew, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I might be going back a little bit, but you mentioned that there was information that was put out in the public domain and there was information that was being held back for obvious reasons. What did you know at that point in time that, say, we, the general public, didn't know?
I know. I'm saying in the course of investigations, there are always bits and pieces that you're...
Of course, yeah.
But in this one, it was all cards. It was all cards
right.
were open and,
right.
and because for the simple reason the race was against time. The race was to find Mark Hennessy, to find that cash guy, and we found the cash guy. Justine, obviously, we thought would be in it.
And we'll come to that. You mentioned, just to go back again, you mentioned there were efforts to contact Mark Hennessy at this time. Essentially he was the chief suspect at this stage. Yeah. What happened? Was his phone off? Did it ring out or what?
His phone was on and off from time to time. I suppose, we had the wherewithal to ping the phone and that, and it was on and was off. At one stage he was on Killiney Beach, and I think some friends of his or some family of his met him, and they tried to talk him into giving himself up, and that, and he drove off. But the big problem was that there was a Red Bull event in Dunleary that Sunday, and there was something like 75,000 people extra in Dunleary area. So the phone masts that were handling an enormous volume of phones. So where you have a situation where masts are handing over because they're full. We've had situations where, looking at missing persons, where masts are handing over from Holt over to Dunleary and vice versa because of the signal skimming across the water. So we had to sort of take it with a pinch of salt when you have a location there, say, because is that the mast, or is it because of the volume of people? Yeah. And he was believed to be in the Dunleary area. Right. So we had one or two. We had one ping in Bray, but it wasn't there. So presumably it was the Dunleary one handing over to Bray. So
if I remember correctly, the guards did release details about the cash cab, but they didn't release Hennessy's name. Is that, or did they release Hennessy's name at the full on Sunday before the incident happened? We'll talk about.
Yeah, well, I think releasing the registration number on that of the cash guy was, in on the scale of things, it's something that we wouldn't normally do, but because of the race was against time and because there was a life, dependent on it, I took the decision that this registration be released.
Did you consider releasing his photograph or his name?
I think we possibly did release them. I just can't.
Was there a description of
I can't be sure of the timeline.
But did it come into your mind, we're going to release Hennessy's details because he was the suspect, or is that because the guards don't really do that? Was that a hard choice for you?
Well, it would be a hard choice if see, I have to think about a robust case in court. So does it stand the test of? So what would these defence people say if you released his name? You were trying him in public before he was even. So you have to consider all of the options and consider the consequences and the unintended consequences of all those decisions that you make.
So by the Sunday afternoon, it really was the number one story in Ireland, and it was quite frenetic. And there were, how many guards would have been involved in the case, in the investigation?
Yeah, there was quite a few, because what you had there was the eastern region, which was Bray, and then you had the DMR from Dunleary, the DMR East. So you had whatever resources they had in the DMR East that they were able to deploy on it, and then you had whatever resources we had from the eastern region, from Bray and that. So there was a considerable number of personnel involved in this investigation. It was high profile, it was life and death.
And because it was life and death, did you feel under more pressure?
You always feel under pressure to deliver on these. You always feel under pressure when you're leading a team. You always feel under pressure to listen to what everybody is saying to you. There's always, hindsight is great, it's 20/20 vision. So you only get the one chance at doing this. So you have to make sure that all of the avenues are covered, that every lead is followed up on.
Okay, so you got, effectively there was a large break, the major break, I think around 7 o'clock on Sunday evening.
Can I ask a question before?
Oh yeah, go on.
Because sorry, you just
Well,
mentioned something that was news to me. Maybe it wasn't news to you, but the interaction in Killiney with a family member, and that there was actually an attempt to tell him to hand himself in. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Like, did he actually say anything, or did he just drive off?
He just drove off. He didn't
Right.
he didn't really entertain them.
Right. And was that arranged, as in a family member had contacted him on the phone and they met?
Obviously, yeah. And we didn't get to hear about it for an hour or so later. So at that stage,
so there was no Garda presence, obviously, within the area.
No, there wasn't. And as I said, like, there was an inordinate amount of people in there. So in the Dunleary, Dalkey area, so driving around was just like a chock-a-block.
Okay.
And the location of Justine at that point, was there a fear that she was there in the car with him at that point, or you just not know?
It would be reasonable to assume, but you couldn't, pin all your hopes on it. But it would be reasonable to assume that she was either in the boot of the car or on the back seat or whatever. But I suppose what I took from that chance meeting with his family was that Justine wasn't in the car.
Right. So Sunday evening, I think around 7 p.m.
Yeah.
I think the story I remember at the time was somebody recognised the car and called the Garda.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah. It was somebody had picked it up from one of the social media feeds. Okay. Like, not the TV, whatever. So it was interesting, where people get their information, because for years and years, like, you'd wonder, you're circulating this information and you're saying, how many people am I reaching on TV? How many people am I reaching on radio? But you're reaching so many people on social media as well. So this was either on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever. So to the best of my knowledge, this person picked it up on social media and suddenly found themselves behind the Qashqai, and rang it in. So
999.
999, 112, whatever. So as a result of that, we had the mobile resources out and about all the time, so we were quickly on the scene, and the Qashqai was followed into the car park there at Cherrywood.
That's an industrial estate. But just when you heard about this, what were your thoughts? What went through your mind? Because I'm really interested to know that when you thought, right, we've got him. Did you think you had him?
Oh yeah. I know I was in Bray at the time in the incident room, and I got the call and straight out into the car and as quick as I could to Cherrywood. And I remember it was a wet evening, and we were just thinking that when the way he drove into the car park and tried to conceal the Qashqai, there was a reason to believe that Justine was in the car at that stage. Well, it was. You'd wonder. You could be forgiven for thinking she's in the car at that stage because of the way he was trying to conceal the car.
What did he do?
He went into the car park and turned right, and he was behind some trees and some shading in that there. So he was kind of offside. Now he could have been offside just for his own protection, but it was like as if he was taking evasive action because he seemed to. I think he copped the woman following him, and I think when the guys came in, they were sort of looking around, and suddenly he copped him over on the right hand side. So it would be. I was hopeful that she was in the car.
You believed she was, did you?
I did. I believed that she was in the car. I believed he was after collecting her, and she was in the car. And I didn't speculate on whether she was, on what condition she was in, but maybe he had gone back to get her, or maybe now he was just going to dispose of the body or whatever. So it was hard to know.
So what happened next?
So I arrived on the scene. Mark Hennessy had been, he was out receiving first aid by the ambulance crew, and he was unconscious.
He had been shot by a detective.
He had been shot by a detective, and that was a separate hearing into that, and all, everything that happened there was correct and proper, and I don't particularly like talking about it because it brings back memories for.
Yes, but it is important to say.
He was totally, absolutely 100% in what he did.
And it is important to say that the GSOC, the Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission, carried out its own investigation to that, and as a result, there were no charges to the detective.
No.
So, in your mind, and obviously GSOC, you believe it was, I think the Americans would call it righteous. It was the right thing to do.
Absolutely the right thing to do. So when I arrived, Mark was on the ground being treated, and I know that one or two of the ambulance people were there imploring him to tell us, where was she? But there was no response, no reply.
Did you see him alive?
I did, yeah.
Was there any? Was he saying anything? Was there any sign of he was alive? But was there any sign of life from him? If you know what I mean?
No, he was on a defib,
right?
And he was. We didn't know that that the trajectory of the bullet had he was shot in the shoulder, but the trajectory of the bullet had it turned once it hit a bone, turned.
But it is fair to say, you said it there, emergency service personnel were effectively begging him to say where Justine was.
Yeah.
That must have been gut-wrenching.
It was actually, it was. Yeah, it was. It was kind of. It was so disappointing. It was so we hadn't stopped all day long. We just kept going all day long, and this was, I was hoping, look in the boot of the car. There, Justine would be in the boot of the car. Boot open, no sign of her.
Talk to us about that. Did you open it, or was it another detective?
I think one of the lads had opened the boot.
Right.
It was there. It was open.
So yes, because they wouldn't mess around if she's in the boot. They need to get her out.
Absolutely.
I think we should. I know maybe I'll say it if you don't, but just the facts of the case, and this has been established. Am I correct in saying that obviously he had been shot, and there was a belief that possibly he may have been harming someone in the vehicle at the time, that she may have been being harmed.
Or I think maybe that he was actually going to harm himself as well.
Right.
He was.
So that's effectively, I know you said the officer detective has been cleared, and you said it was the right thing to do. Would you mind? Can we talk about the actual incident of the shooting? Because a lot of people wouldn't probably know what happened. How he was.
Understand
what
the reason
happened.
why it had to happen, I suppose. Yeah, but the general public may not.
If you don't mind, Frank, we just need to tell people what happened. My understanding is it was the first guard on the scene was a uniformed guard, and then the armed detectives came along, and then he was shot.
Yeah.
And again, GSOC was cleared. In your mind, why was he shot?
Well, he was reaching. I don't want to do a disservice to my colleague down here, but he was reaching for what he believed was a knife or a weapon or whatever, and I think that there may have been a suggestion that Justine was on the floor and that he was going to stab her before he gave himself up. So, and he had given plenty of opportunity to get out of the car. I mean, he could see what was in front of him and to get out of the car, but he obviously wasn't going to.
So Gardy repeatedly asked him to get out of the car?
He was given several opportunities to get out of the car.
And then the officer had to fire the shot because I'm presuming, I think, this isn't, controversial. He believed there was an imminent risk to Justine because of the way that Mark Hennessy was moving.
Yeah.
Okay. Your colleagues checked the boot. You realise she's not there.
Yeah.
What's your reaction?
I was gutted. I mean, I was absolutely. I remember just thinking, God, where else could he possibly have brought her? It was just back to square one. It was just located the car, located Mark, no sign of Justine. My number one goal, and it was difficult down at that scene.
And did that? You have said that you had maybe a belief or a suspicion that she was dead when she wasn't in the car. As far as you was concerned, she was dead.
Yeah.
So you knew then, effectively, she was dead.
Yeah.
How did that affect you?
Yeah, well, I hadn't achieved my goal, and bearing in mind I'd met her parents and I told her we'd do our very, very best, and I told the team we'd do our very, very best, and there's no doubt about it. Everybody gave shoulder to the wheel. Everybody gave 100%, and it's difficult when you. We weren't to know then that within a very small space of hours from when she was abducted, that Justine were murdered anyway. We weren't to know that. Like by 11:30 that night, she probably was murdered.
That's a question I'm going to ask later on. But so there were two. Once Hennessy did he die at the scene?
He did. Yeah.
Okay, so once Hennessy was deceased, there were two issues. That scene had to be preserved, and there was an investigation into that. Yeah. But at the same time, you were still, is it fair to say, frantically searching for Justine?
Yeah, that scene had to be preserved, and of course there was a GSOC investigation come along as well because of the shot fire, so we had to disclose every single thing along the way with GSOC who have oversight into everything we do, and so the scene had to be preserved for that reason and for the proper investigation. Right. But the search for Justine was still ongoing.
And you made a decision to send up the helicopter at that stage, did you?
As a kind of like when I went back to the station, back to Bray, just sitting down, figuring it out. Where are we going here? What else can we do? How else? Like we'd known all these favourite spots. We'd interviewed everybody we could possibly get our hands on, and I telephoned the guys in the air support wing, and I was just throwing it around with them. Look, you have a heat seeker on this thing, on the helicopter. So maybe if you could fly over Cherrywood where the car park was, and then up to the surrounding area there, that maybe you could have a look and see if there's anything, sort of body or pick up source of heat that we could have a look at and see.
Would a body, a dead body, still go off a certain amount of heat? Was that your hope?
Yeah. Well, yeah, a dead body would still have a certain amount of heat, and we had to locate the body anyway, one way or another. And I'd already been making arrangements to put search teams together first light. But I thought that just get ahead of the posse and see if we could detect some sort of sources of heat up around the area. And I remember about 12:30 that night into the early morning. The guys in the chopper were ringing me and said, "Look, we're detecting several heat sources around here at every fox and whatever in the area." Yeah. But we don't detect anything. And bearing in mind, Justine was such a small, petite girl who was probably curled up in a ball anyway. So, at 12:30, and they were running out of fuel, and they said, "Look, Frank, we're going to have to call this. We're going to have to." So that was.
And that would have been the rough area where we'll talk about this, where her body was found the next day. So. Monday, Mark Hennessy is killed on the Sunday, shot dead on the Sunday. The hunt for Justine is continuing the Monday. Yeah. Now, I'm imagining the car would have been sealed off. So, but then there was something found in the car. There was a note.
Yeah, there was a note found in the car.
When was that too? Can you remember?
Well, with the scenes of crime, people
Right.
would find, but it was blood soaked.
Right, but just to explain, all the Gardaí at the scene would have moved away from the car because it has to be sealed off.
Absolutely.
So it's the SOCO, the scenes of crime officers, who go in and do so that's a big search the next Monday morning, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, that note was found, but again, it was another deflating moment because it was blood soaked.
Right.
So we had to figure a way of deciphering that. So again, it was a trip up to our good friends and colleagues in the Forensic Bureau. Another big ask of them, saying, okay, reinvent the wheel here, guys, see what you can do. And in fairness to them, they came up with the miracle, and they, as usual, and they found some way of dissolving the blood and coming up with the note.
There was a lot of personal stuff in the note.
Yeah.
But there was also, my understanding is, he effectively said Jastine's body was in a place called Puck's Castle. Where is that in relation to Cherrywood?
It's actually when we got up to Puck's Castle, we were actually overlooking Cherrywood and overlooking the car park, and it turns out it was one of his favourite spots or scenic spots. So we went up there early, and I had arranged for the division officer had to go to the division officer had arranged for the army wing of the army to come out. And we'd used the army before on searches, and they're absolutely superb. They cover so much ground in what they do. It's brilliant what they do. So anyway, we had the army on standby, and we had our own search teams on standby. But I remember walking up with the division officer, and
which is what we would call a chief superintendent.
Chief superintendent, yeah, and a member of his staff, and. She found Jastine's purse on the way up to Puck's Castle to the right. So
sort of an undergrowth, was it?
It was kind of thrown off the beaten path.
Right.
In fairness, and fair play for the way she spotted it. And of course, when we spotted that, we said, "Well, we're zeroing, we're very close." So we went back down and. Between the jigs and the reels, with whatever other stuff we were doing, we briefed both our own search team and the army, and it was just uncanny really how it happened. But the army set off on the left and the guards set off on the right, and one of the guards, for some strange reason, zeroed in on a particular spot, walked down through the gorse, and he found the body in conditions that. If we had to do a methodical search on it and start with the briar cutting machines and all the knives and tools that we used to cut away gorse, it probably would have taken us a couple of days. But I think he had a kind of a country background himself or whatever, but he noticed something out of the way and he walked down, and I would say from here to the wall there, and turned right, and there was a body in there. And I remember having to bring the state pathologist down to the scene, and we kind of pushed the gorse back a bit, but it was still hazardous in walking down. And probably somebody would say to you, "Oh, with health and safety, you should have had ropes going down there and whatever." But anyway, he went down and he found it there, and it was just amazing, just so quickly,
What were your emotions when you found her?
Well, you think of the mum and dad and say, look, it's you recovered the body. They're never going to get closure on it, but if you didn't recover the body, it would be just so traumatic, so much more traumatic. I mean, how traumatic is it losing your daughter? But if you don't find the body, then they're always expecting a knock on the door, say, So it was. It just comes with the terrain. Yeah, just have to.
Did she look at peace? Did she look at peace? I know that may be a weird question, but but some bodies can sometimes look at peace when they're gone.
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's really difficult to know. I don't know.
Okay. Why do you think he did it?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, it would appear that he had seen her at the bus stop, for whatever, and had he seen her there before? We had gone through all our databases in order to see had he ever come up in anything like this before, and no, he hadn't. And then to see the car following the bus and passing out the bus, and then waiting for her in Enniskerry, and then following her up along in Enniskerry. So he obviously had seen her before, and was he infatuated with her?
Is that possible? Do you think he was?
Quite possibly. She was a very stunning girl. So
just to get this right in my head, do you think he saw her at the bus stop in Bray?
Yeah.
And followed her from Bray?
Yeah.
He decided to take her in Bray and followed her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's obviously there were indications that he was infatuated with her in
maybe
some way.
Maybe he was infatuated with her. Why did he pick her over anybody else? Why did he abduct her? Why did he go from Bray to Enniskerry after? Why did he follow the bus? Why did he?
How far is that? Is that a good 10 miles?
Well, it's the guts of 7 or 8 miles.
I did not know. So he followed her from Bray and overtook the bus. Yeah. So if he overtook the bus, he must have known when she was getting off.
Yeah.
So he must have seen her before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that your belief that
I believe he saw her before. Yeah.
And decided to take her when? My God. Because we thought it was a spur of the moment thing.
Random.
So it wasn't random. What's your thought is more important than mine? You don't think it was random, obviously.
I think my impression is that he had seen her before, and I think that maybe he had followed her once before, because I get a sense that he knew her movements.
Gosh.
So are you saying he had done a dry run?
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, because it's very hard to try and put an explanation to it.
Okay.
A rationale to it.
May I ask, I know we mentioned the note and there were personal things in it, so obviously there was no confession in the note of any description.
There was no apology?
I haven't read the note in so long.
Okay. Oh, no, that's fine. Right, Frank, we're only going to keep you a couple more minutes because this is just brilliant.
I haven't read the note in so long.
Okay. No, there's no problem. Tell me, do you think Hennessy committed other crimes like this?
No, I don't believe he has.
So he went from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And his motive was sexual.
Well, I'm presuming that it was, but it would be so much easier if you come in Sunday morning and you are running down through the list of people who own cash guys, and suddenly you see, oh, this is a guy who has reared his head above the parapet before, for want of a better word. And you say that makes things so much easier. But when you're actually dealing with somebody who has never featured before, then it makes it that much more difficult.
Because you mentioned, that area, Baltinglass, and obviously that brings to mind Larry Murphy and all, the missing women, the triangle and all. Did you ever consider him, or
No.
They never considered him for Operation Trace, retrospectively?
No.
So you're satisfied he wasn't involved in anything?
Satisfied, yeah, and I actually had, done the inquiries there and put his name forward and his DNA and all the rest forward, and no.
Wow.
No.
So he became infatuated with this lady that he had seen at least once before, followed her at least once, saw her and decided to follow her for 7 or 8 miles and then take her.
Well, that's the best theory out there, because I don't want to create a panic among women either, because you can see the debate is going on about women getting on, and I'm saying women getting on buses after dark and things like that, and it's difficult enough time without sort of putting that out as well for people.
Yes. Well,
I suppose people would have wondered and speculated without evidence after this that, given the planning and whatever he seemed to put in it, that perhaps he had the MO that he'd done it before. But as you say, you'd looked into that and there was no evidence to suggest that.
No.
What do you think happened? As in, there's obviously, we know he took her at 5:30. We know he was shot dead around 7:30. I think about 4:00 on the Monday, roughly that time. I know it was the afternoon that he was found. But there's a huge gap. What do you think happened? What's your best? I'm not going to say guess. What's your estimate as the senior investigating officer who knows the case? What happened? What do you think happened?
I think that he took her. I think he brought her up to Puxcastle, that direction, and I think that he assaulted her and
sexually assaulted her.
More than likely, yeah. And I think at that stage he probably took her life. And then we have him on CCTV in one of the local pubs later that night, and acting like as if nothing happened, not a care in the world. So I do believe that at that stage that he had taken Jastine's life.
Is that comprehensible that someone could kill somebody and then go out in the lash? Is that not? To me, it sounds shocking.
Yeah.
Is it shocking for you?
It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe, but there's a void there in the absence of not actually knowing what went on. Mm-hmm. He did appear to be taking a substance, and he did appear, to be nothing's wrong, just out on the night. So it's very hard to explain. Now,
I presume the forensics and the state pathologist and the post-mortem probably would have established the time of death. So you think it was within an hour or two of her kidnapping? Do you?
It's very hard to establish the actual precise time of death when a body has been left out in the open. So you're not in room temperature. You don't have the body temperature cooling down at a normal rate. You have the body cooling down depending on the temperature, ambient temperature outside, and whether the raining and whether it's whatever. So it's very hard to pinpoint an exact time of death. But
would it be fair to assume that he was out on the lash on the Saturday evening? So. She was dead before that. It was within a couple of hours, effectively, of the kidnapping.
We have never come across a room or a shed or someplace, a cell or whatever, that you would hold a body. Mm-hmm. So, to my way of thinking, it's not as if she was handcuffed or bound and gagged and tied up in a particular room or a shed or lockup, because we haven't come across anywhere like that. So. In the absence of that sort of setup, that sort of evidence, to my way of thinking is that he had taken her up to Puxcastle for close to where her body was located, and whatever happened while they were there, that she was sexually assaulted, and then I think that in order for him to leave that area, go down and have a few drinks or whatever, why run the risk of leaving her alive, that she could raise the alarm, finger point at him? So that's a sort of another way of looking at it.
May I just ask you?
It's the best theory, really, the strongest theory.
Yeah.
May I just ask you, it's a difficult question to ask, but did she have defensive injuries? Was there evidence that she fought for her life?
I can't really comment on it because I haven't read in so long. I obviously studied it in detail at the time, but there was all sorts of injuries on her. But there was injuries of being dragged on her back. There was injuries of her arms put down the gorse and all the rest as well. So there was all sorts of injuries on her.
I may ask you, it's more just asking your personal opinion, but based off his actions, do you think he was a psychopath?
No, I don't think he was a psychopath. No, there was no evidence to suggest he's a psychopath, and from talking to his parents and his friends and that, there is no evidence of him being a psychopath.
So this was something that was possibly sexually motivated, and that he had a fascination with this one particular person. That's the theory.
maybe he had a fascination with her or whatever, and maybe he just didn't think it through.
But he had seen her before.
But it would appear that I would be fairly confident that he had seen her before.
And obviously he must have, because to overtake the bus to go and I presume he stopped around the bus stop, so he must have known she was going to get up there. So that's a very strong indicator that he knew her.
Yes.
Wow.
Incredible. Was that the most difficult case for you, or is it hard to contextualise it in that way? But it certainly was a difficult case for you to investigate and to be involved in.
Look, they're all difficult cases. I think I told you I went down to Arklow to a murder investigation there, and one of the team said to me, "Where are we going with this?" And I said, "The locals will offer this guy up within a couple of days." And right enough, that's the way it happened. I could tell you about other investigations we're on, and every one of them are difficult because you have a family there that are more or less holding you accountable. You have the public, you have the media, and if you miss a step along the way, you can't really reclaim that. So they're all difficult. They all bring their own degree of difficulty with them. And the reason I don't like talking about a lot of them is because you form a bond then with the family and their friends, and you promise them that you do the very best for them. And at the end of the day, that's what you do.
I think that's a good place to leave it.
Frank, that was absolutely fascinating. Thanks a lot for your time. Gripping, absolutely gripping, and we really appreciate your time.